Hi, my name's Leo and I'm a boat builder and a sailor, and I'm on a mission to sail this boat Tally-Ho back from the Pacific Ocean to the UK to sail once again in the Fastnet race 100 years after she won it in 1927. In this video we're going to be looking at some techniques, some principles and some tricks for manoeuvring and docking boats under power. These will apply to many different types of boats in many different situations, but they're particularly useful if you find yourself maneuvering a boat on your own or maneuvering long keel, heavy displacement, single screw boats like Tally-Ho, which can be quite difficult to handle under power. And if you want to get straight to that technical stuff, then skip ahead to the time that's shown on the screen right now. Otherwise, we're going to start this video with footage from a few months ago during the winter when I found myself about to lose my crew and facing the prospect of being completely alone on Tally-Ho for the first time. Alright, Paddy, what time is it and what are we doing?
6:07 a.m. and Leo's about to row me to the ferry dock. What a mission.
This is fun, isn't
it? Dude loves a logistics mission. I'll note to the YouTube audience that Leo kindly anchored the boat right across the way from the ferry dock, which is right there.
Well, no one wants to get a public bus at 6 in the morning.
Oh Lord. Look at her. Goodbye, Tally-Ho. Big one. Dude. Thanks, Cap. This was so fun.
Alright, have a good one, dude. So I rowed Paddy ashore to catch his ferry this morning. Marat is ashore visiting relatives for a few days. So for the first time in this kind of situation, I'm alone on Tally-Ho, which is pretty exciting, but a little bit nerve-wracking as well. I've got to move the boat because this anchorage is exposed from the southeast, and so I'm just going to pick up the anchor and move around the corner. Not going to attempt to sail or anything like that today, but hopefully I'll manage to handle the boat and the anchor and all that stuff on my own. This is Tally-Ho's anchor light, which lights us up at night for other vessels to see and lets them know that we're anchored. When not in use, it's brought down and stored below. Well, as soon as the anchor's off the bottom, which will be any second now, we'll start drifting back towards that beach just there, so I'm going to have to run back to the cockpit and put the engine in gear. Okay, the anchor's in, that's the first hurdle. This is a very old style of capstan that doesn't have an inbuilt brake, so the line that I have wrapped around it is the brake, and I can very easily control the speed that the chain goes out or stop it completely. Well, I know it's probably not very fashionable to film yourself while you're out on a jog, but I just couldn't help it. It's so beautiful out here, and I think that's the most seals I've ever seen in one place in my life. Looking forward to spending my first night at anchor alone, and hopefully the weather holds out and we don't drag or anything worrying happen like that. The next day I stayed in the anchorage, and it was pretty uneventful until I noticed that there was something else much bigger than a seal sharing the anchorage with me. So I took my dinghy out to investigate. Presumably these orcas or killer whales were looking for seal snacks, but the seals had wisely vanished. In any case, the weather the next morning was much better, and it was time for me to make a move, but not before a good breakfast. Well, today I've got a slightly more difficult challenge ahead. I'm going to leave this anchorage and take the boat to Sydney, which is a couple of hours away. And once we're there, I'm going to have to park the boat in a marina in a pretty tight slip with a difficult entrance. So we'll see how that goes. I'll be on my own. Maybe there'll be someone on the dock to catch a line, maybe not, we'll see. But my first challenge before I do any of that is I've got to work out how to get the dinghy on board on my own. So while we're underway here, I'm going to explain with some diagrams some of the techniques which can help when manoeuvring a boat like this. And the first thing I'm going to talk about pretty briefly is prop walk. Prop walk is a phenomenon that is mainly apparent when going astern or in reverse. And what you'll notice is that if you have a single screw or single prop boat like tally-ho, when it's spinning in reverse, it will kick the stern of the boat either to port or to starboard. This depends on how the propulsion system is set up, but most boats have a right-hand prop rotation, so we'll use that as our example. In this case, when the propeller is spinning backwards in reverse, the stern of the boat walks to port. I find it easiest to remember that at low speeds, putting the boat astern will turn the whole vessel clockwise. What's actually happening here is that when the propeller is spinning in reverse, it's pushing a cone-shaped vortex of spinning water forward around the hull of the boat. Most of that moving water goes out into the open ocean, but part of it is pushed against the hull of the boat, compressed and accelerated, and results in more thrust in the opposite direction. It's important to remember that prop walk has nothing to do with the position of the rudder. In fact, when you're astern, the rudder doesn't do anything until the boat is actually moving. Now, prop walk can make life very difficult if you're not expecting it, but if you know how to use it, it can be one of your greatest tools. For example, you can turn the boat in a very tight circle if you go the same direction as the prop walk, keep the rudder hard over and alternate between forward and reverse. Trying to go the opposite direction to the prop walk, in this case anti-clockwise, would take a much greater area. When turning tally-ho in a tight space, I often turn clockwise even if it means turning a greater angle. I also usually come alongside port side to the dock, because this way when you put the engine into reverse to slow the boat down, it pulls the stern of the boat towards the dock. If I do have to come in starboard side to the dock, I usually approach much more slowly, because using the engine astern to slow the boat down will turn the boat in the wrong direction. So when doing anything single-handed, the key thing is preparing and looking ahead. Now, the berth that I'm going to be parking in is very tight and difficult to get into. I'm going to come in astern, and then I have to do quite a tight turn in a space that's only just big enough for the boat, and I have to turn anti-clockwise, which is the opposite direction to the way the boat naturally wants to turn because of the prop walk. If you have to turn against your prop walk to tie up to a dock, or if your conditions or surroundings make approaching or leaving a dock challenging, spring lines can often be a huge help. When a boat is tied up alongside a dock, spring lines are the ones which stop it from moving fore and aft. The other lines that stop it rotating or moving away from the dock are called breast lines. Spring lines can be located in all sorts of different places on a vessel, and the thing which really makes them a spring line is the fact that they run more or less fore and aft rather than athwartships. Spring lines can be used in all sorts of different ways to get useful leverage to maneuver the boat, and we're just going to look at a couple of different examples. Springing off a dock is very common when the boat is pinned on by the wind or tide. You can do this with a forward stern spring, which means that the line is running forward from the stern of the boat, and that will spring the bow away from the dock, or you can use an aft bow spring. In this case, the line is leading aft from the bow of the boat, and that will spring the stern away from the dock. Here's an example of an aft bow spring holding the bow of the boat into the dock while the engine pushes the boat ahead and drives the stern away from the dock. When the angle is great enough, the bow spring can be slipped and the boat can be motored astern away from the dock. We'll see an example of a stern spring later on, but now I'm going to talk about my favourite mooring trick that can make getting to even the most difficult dock in the most difficult conditions really easy, even if you're on your own. And this is the aft leading midship spring. This is a long line led out through some kind of fair lead near the middle of the boat. All you have to do is get the end of this line secured to the dock somewhere near where you want your cockpit to end up. Once the line is secure and tight, you can motor gently against it and bring the boat into the dock. The best thing about this technique is that because the spring line is secured to the boat near its center of rotation, you can use the prop wash from the rudder to really easily change the orientation or rotation of the boat, making sure that when it reaches the dock it's nicely parallel to it. So to do that, I'm going to come in and I'm going to back up right up to the dock, and if there's no one there to catch my lines, I'm going to jump off the transom, hook on my port side aft leading spring, and then I'll hop back on board before the boat drifts away, hopefully, and then I will take up on that line and then gently motor forwards on it, and that'll spin the boat around anti-clockwise, and I'll just kind of keep doing that, and that should bring me in towards the pontoon net and spin me around to port as well. I'm all good, thanks. Yeah, thank you. So the really great thing about using this one aft leading spring is that as soon as you've got it on the cleat, you've really got full control of the boat, and you can use it to bring yourself into the dock. And because that spring line is at the midpoint, the pivot point of the boat, you can use your rudder and your prop wash to spin the boat whichever way you want, to make sure that as you come in towards the dock, you're parallel to it. And then once you're against the dock, like I am now, you can just leave the engine in gear forwards and fiddle with the tiller a little bit, or the rudder, and just make sure you're parallel and you're staying there, and then you can just leave the boat like that while you get all your other lines on. So it's completely stable now. There's pressure on the fenders, it's pushed up against the dock, there's water coming out over the rudder, and I'm able to take my time and get all the other lines on. Well, that went so smoothly in the end that I feel almost a little bit silly for making such a fuss about it. But joking aside, all that preparation and planning, of course, is why it went so smoothly. And also, you know, there's very little wind in here because it's so protected, so that makes it easier. Okay, so a little time has passed, and now I'm getting ready to leave this same berth, and it's pretty tight getting out as well. So what I'm going to do is use a forward stern spring. And so that's a spring line that leads forward from the stern. And I'm going to motor astern against that, and that's going to spin the boat away from the dock using the leverage. So that'll make a lot more sense when you see it, but the first thing I'm going to do is walk the boat forward so that it's got room to swing out without hitting this boat next door. So at this point, the boat is only attached to the dock with this one spring line, which I would call a forward stern spring, and that line is set as a slip spring, which means that it's not actually made off on the dock, it just wraps around the cleat and then comes back to the boat. So one end is looped down here, so that's the dead end, and then this end I've got control of, and I've got it just wrapped around this winch so I can quickly flick it off. The motor is in astern, that's pushing water forwards, and the leverage between the spring line here, which is off to the port side, and the propeller, which is in the middle of the boat, is creating a twisting moment. So as I speak, the boat is slowly springing away from the dock, and I'll just jump on in a minute, but I just want to point out that fender placement is very important when you're doing this. You need to have a big fender right at the stern, because that bit of the boat is going to get pretty close to the dock. Now this turn that I'm making here is actually a difficult one because it's fairly tight and we're turning to port, which is not the way that we can use our prop walk to help us. So we'll see if I make it in one go, but I don't think I will. So I'm going to have to go astern. When I go astern, if I'm not careful, the boat will spin clockwise, which would work against what I'm trying to do here. So I have to go astern in a particular way. I'm going to go astern fairly hard and get some speed up, because only when you've got movement or way on going astern will your rudder work. So I'm going to try and get some speed, and then I'm going to put the helm hard over to turn the stern to starboard, and I'm going to be careful not to keep the engine on astern because that will give me too much prop warp. So I'm just getting a little bit of turning moment here, not a lot, but even going straight is an advantage here, and at least I'm not turning clockwise, which is what the prop warp is trying to get me to do. So I'm in neutral now, straighten the helm, forward again, and then use my prop wash, sail it hard over, to start turning the boat again. Now if I got a little bit faster astern there, I would have had more control, but that was okay. I was just able to back up in a straight line there, which gave me enough room to turn into this channel. So of course there's lots of other ways of using spring lines and lots of other techniques involved in manoeuvring and mooring vessels like this, but I hope the tips and tricks I've shown you today are useful or at least interesting. Right now we're actually back on board Tally-Ho after our trip to Europe, and in the next video we're going to be getting caught up and talking about our plans to sail to the UK for the 2027 Fastnet race, including which route we're planning to take and why. Until then, thanks a lot for watching, and a massive thank you to everyone who has donated or otherwise supported this project. It does make a huge difference. It means you're able to keep on sailing and maintaining this boat, and it means you're able to keep on making and editing these videos. So I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.